Hey everyone. I want to explore the idea of what if everything is the opposite, or at least radically different than what we perceive it to be. And this exploration is inspired by something that my roommate Tim brought up to me this morning. And Tim was speaking about Yuval Harari, who's the author of a book called Sapiens. And Yuval suggested that human beings did not domesticate wheat, but that wheat instead domesticated human beings. And it's an interesting concept. And when Tim said that to me, immediately jumping into my mind is when Marshall McLuhan said that human beings are the sex organs of the machine world. And so I think as humans, we're pretty egocentric, both as individuals and as a species, and we see ourselves as the center of all things. When in reality, I think our relationship as creator and being this unidirectional force exists in a much more bidirectional or interconnected or symbiotic arrangement with the rest of the universe. And I'll make some examples. So when I was driving to visit my family for Christmas at the end of last year, I saw the cars in front of me, and I was looking at their tail lights. You know, they have the two brake lights and then the bumper, and it looks like faces were staring at me. You know, like a lot of the technology we design might have faces in it. And so I'm staring at these cars, and they look like conscious beings. They have faces, and then it made me wonder. I'm like, whoa, what if rather than human beings being the force that decided that automobiles would come into existence, instead, the automobile consciousness existed in the ether, and then it implanted itself into the human mind, which then inspired the human being to assemble itself to create the automobile. So to explain that in a different way, it's just rather than humans being the inventors of the car, for example, the car actually is a consciousness that exists outside of humanity, and it wanted to exist in the third dimension, so it entered the human psyche and inspired us to make it. So rather than us really assembling cars, it's more as though the cars assembled us to assemble it and manifest it into the third dimension. It also touches on something that Duncan Trussell, one of my favorite comedians and philosophers, I was at one of his stand-up shows, and he went on this rant that I can't do full justice with, so I'll just sort of paraphrase. But he was talking about like who's in control of the relationship between us, human beings, and technology. So let's take computers, for example, and he's like, originally computers were these devices that would occupy an entire building. Let's say they were massive, and you had to go and visit them, and they were very rare in the world. And then this computer, this species, it shrunk down, and then it got onto our desks. And not everyone had them, but more and more business people started using these computers, and they would be in their offices, so they would interface with these computers, let's say on a weekly basis. And then the technology evolved into personal computing, whereby most people in the developed world had a computer on their desk at home, and then they're spending multiple hours per day interfacing with this technology. And then the computer shrinks down and it becomes a laptop. So now this device is with us much more frequently. We carry it in our backpacks, our briefcases, and we take it around with us, and it's sort of now occupying more of our consciousness and more of our attention. And then it shrinks down even further, and this little computer, or the computer, jumps inside of our pocket, and now it's with us all the time. And most people in the developed world have this device in their pocket all the time. This technology, this being, this species is propagating and spreading and using us to propagate it. And then Duncan took it a step further, and he's like, and now with teledeldonics, which is the idea of using virtual reality and physical apparatuses to have sex in the virtual reality space, so that, theoretically, eventually it could feel like you're actually having sexual intercourse in a virtual reality. He's like, so now these technologies have gone from being inside of our pocket, now they're actually fucking us. So like, they're having sex with us, and it's this incredible evolution of a species. And we might not think of it as a species because it's not biological, which is a term I struggle with to begin with, because, or the term natural versus artificial, for example, because to me, technology is as natural as we are, right? If you consider, let's say, a beaver and its beaver dam, nobody ever looks at a beaver dam and says like, oh, that's an unnatural structure, like it's screwing up nature, blah, blah, blah. And yet when human beings build a skyscraper, our homes, our expressions of ourselves, we start perceiving it as unnatural to the world. However, in my mind, anything that we give birth to, whether it's technology or buildings, is an expression of humanity, which are a natural force of the earth, and therefore our expressions are natural as well. So yeah, it's interesting to think about that. Maybe we aren't so much the creators of technology, but perhaps they're using us to create them. And it also sort of ties in with, because we typically perceive ourselves as the creators and we're the governing force as to whether or not these technologies can exist, this egocentrism extends beyond technology, and certainly applies to our environment as well, in the sense that I think human beings as a species almost think that we are the owners of planet Earth, that it is our home, that it exists for us in a way. But if you consider the size of human beings to planet Earth, we are essentially equivalent to the microorganisms running around on our skin. So on your skin, on my skin, there are little microorganisms running around that we can't even see because they're so small. And you nor I would probably pay a great deal of concern towards those microorganisms. We wouldn't think of them as that being that significant. So what if to Mother Earth, we're just those little microorganisms running around on her skin, and we're not that big of a deal to her, And so I wouldn't suggest that we're meaningless, because I think these relationships are, rather than being unidirectional, are, like I said, bidirectional and symbiotic. So we all work together. The same way that in actuality, these microorganisms on your skin and the microorganisms inside of you influence your thoughts, your behaviors, your feelings, your emotions, all of those things. And we're increasingly, science is revealing, and many of us have known for even longer, that your gut biome, for example, your gut, it could even be more influential in your thinking and behavior than the brain that's in your head. So the gut brain might be more significant to your behavior, which is why you see such drastic changes in people when they start eating healthy or they start moving and meditating, because all of that starts attracting and inviting different microorganisms inside of the body, which then yields a healthier individual. So, in the human body, 90% of the matter that is inside of us and the DNA actually belongs to foreign entities, so microorganisms, and only about 10% of what's inside of you is truly human DNA. So your whole body is this vessel for all sorts of different beings, like microorganism beings, and we might think that these beings aren't, conscious or whatever, but they certainly are. They are existing on a different plane of reality that influences our way of being, and I think that we too influence Mother Earth, and the way we treat the planet affects her overall expression and her overall health, but that we certainly don't own it, and she influences us as well. It's this symbiosis. And I just want to make one last point about, humans being vessels, in addition to being creators, in that when we look at, let's say, plant medicines and psychedelics, I think the ideas that, let's say, magic mushrooms offer human beings those ideas want to be propagated. I believe the mushroom wants those ideas to be propagated. Personally, and I know many others will agree, that the ideas they have to share are incredibly beneficial, often surround love and interconnectedness and taking care of all things, and a oneness and a unity, and treating all things with respect. And I believe that the mushrooms want to exist and want to propagate their ideas further, and they do this by interfacing with humanity via the human ingestion of the mushroom. And then humans start talking about these ideas with fellow humans, which then inspires fellow humans to ingest the mushroom as well, and then further spread the awareness and the consciousness and the fungi, the plant itself. Just as this conversation may even be doing that for some people, inspiring them to explore these ideas or these plants. Similarly with ayahuasca, I've been frequently contemplating, does ayahuasca have an agenda as a plant species, as a plant teacher, and as a plant spirit? And increasingly, I think she does. I think ayahuasca does have an agenda, and I think it's very environmentally focused. It's about taking care of planet Earth and ensuring her longevity, ensuring Mother Earth's health and happiness overall. So I think it's a positive agenda, but it's, it seems to be almost across the board where people who drink ayahuasca feel a deeper connection and intimacy with Mother Earth and care more for the environment afterwards. It's not universal, absolutely universal. I'm sure there are some people who may not feel that connection, but for the most part it seems as though that's the case. So perhaps even ayahuasca is using humans as a vessel to spread its consciousness, to spread its awareness. Similarly with marijuana, I believe she is utilizing humanity to spread her consciousness, and we're starting to see marijuana spread around the world, perhaps even to the point of abuse. I would suggest. I think it might be being used a bit too much these days, but that's just my opinion. So I just wanted to explore the idea of, what if everything is the opposite? We think we're the ones creating computers, but what if computers are actually using us to create them? We think we domesticated wheat through the agricultural revolution, but what if wheat actually used us, assembled us so that it could propagate and procreate in a much more massive and widespread scale? Because, before the agricultural revolution, there wasn't wheat growing everywhere, and then we have fields across the planet that are just full of wheat. And wheat is like one of the biggest staples in the world diet. It's something I don't eat at all because I don't think it actually is a healthy food or helps you feel good whatsoever. I think we'd be better off not eating it. Again, that's somewhat opinion, but it's also backed by a lot of research. But that plant seemingly wants to exist, and so it is, in a sense, using humanity to propagate its existence, perhaps even at our expense. I just wanted to explore those ideas of maybe things aren't so unidirectional or necessarily the way we intuitively, or at least initially, perceive them to be. So hope you guys find this fascinating, interesting, evocative, provocative. Comment, message me, let me know what you think. Would love to hear your ideas and your reactions. I love you guys. Peace.